Hello my sneaky stabby friends and welcome to Gamertopia. In this video I'll be covering this beast of a build for Rogue. It doesn't have the survivability of my 1 to 50 Rogue build, but it does have some serious damage output. With this build I was able to kill Elias super early and get into World Tier 4 as quick as possible. If you end up using this build or enjoy the video, it would do me a huge favor if you subscribe to my channel. This will also keep you up to date with all of my future Diablo videos, so it's a win-win, I promise. But let's get into the build so you can get back to the game. We'll start off with 1 rank of Puncture, and then we'll grab Enhanced and Fundamental Puncture for the vulnerability effect. Next, our core skill will be, of course, Twisting Blades with 5 ranks, and we'll also take Enhanced Twisting Blades and Improved Twisting Blades for the dazing effect. You'll also want to max out Sturdy for some damage reduction and Siphoning Strikes to give us a little survivability. Then moving down to the Agility tree, I opted for Shadow Step, mostly because of the unstoppable aspect of it. With less survivability in this build, you'll need to be mobile, so you'll want to be able to break out of any movement impairing effects. We're also going to take Enhanced Shadow Step for the increased crit chance and Disciplined Shadow Step for the cooldown reduction. Then we'll max out Weapon Mastery for the increased damage, and I also added 1 rank of Rapid Gambits and Trick Attacks for the evade cooldown reduction and knockdown chance. For the Subterfuge tree, you'll want 1 rank of Poison Trap, and then we'll take Enhanced Poison Trap for the knockdown effect, and Countering Poison Trap, which will give us a chance of resetting our imbuement cooldowns. Before we get to that, we'll also want to max out Exploit for increased damage to healthy and injured enemies, and Malice for the increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Now for the imbuement tree, you'll want to max out Poison Imbuement so we can stack even more poison on top of our Poison Trap. We'll take Enhanced Poison Imbuement, which will increase the duration our enemies are poisoned, and we'll also take Blended Poison Imbuement, which will give us 75% more damage whenever we critically strike with a poison imbued skill. Before moving on to our ultimate skills, you'll want to grab 1 rank of the Deadly Venom passive, giving us another boost to our poison damage, and 1 rank of Debilitating Toxins. This will give us damage reduction from our poisoned enemies. We will be using the Death Trap ultimate in this build with Prime Death Trap so that our enemies are pulled into the trap, and Supreme Death Trap, which will reduce the cooldown time on our ultimate skill. We'll also be grabbing quite a few passives in this tree, starting with 1 rank of Innervation, which will give us some energy regeneration, but we're mostly taking this to open us up to being able to grab 3 ranks of Second Wind. This is going to give us 15% lucky hit chance every time we use 100 energy. Then we'll take 3 ranks of Trap Mastery. Since we are going to be using Poison and Death Trap a lot, this passive will be a must for this build. Each time we use our Poison or Death Trap, the passive is going to give us a huge 12% increased crit chance against our vulnerable enemies and crowd controlled enemies. This is going to basically be all of them between using your Poison Trap for knockdown, Daze from Twisting Blades, and the vulnerable and slow from Puncture. Now just a few more passives. We'll take 1 rank of Aftermath to give us a little bit of energy regeneration, 1 rank of Adrenaline Rush for a little bit more energy regeneration, and this also opens us up to get 3 ranks of Haste, which will give us 15% increased movement speed while at or above 50% energy, and 15% increased attack speed while below 50% energy. Lastly, for our key passive, we'll be taking Exposure, which will give us a 25% chance to reduce the cooldowns of our trap skills by 20%. For our specialization, we'll be using combo points to give our Twisting Blades a pretty large boost in damage and increase movement speed when consumed. Now moving on to our Paragon boards, we'll be using the Closer glyph in the first one to increase the damage of Twisting Blades. I don't have this glyph leveled up yet, but when I do, it'll also give us a 10% increased damage reduction, and you'll want to grab all of the rare nodes on this board. The next board we are going to use is Deadly Ambush, which is going to buff our trap skills. You'll want to work your way up to the left, grabbing the Trapper rare node for increased trap skill damage and damage to trapped enemies. Then work your way over to the Legendary node, which will give us a massive 23% increased crit damage to enemies who are affected by a trap skill. Moving up to the glyph socket, we'll be using the Exploit glyph for the increased vulnerable damage and the guarantee of making an enemy vulnerable from the additional bonus. You'll want to grab the Engineering rare node and work your way over to the board exit on the right, grabbing the Cunning and Spring-loaded rare nodes on your way. The next board we're going to use is the Eldritch Bounty board. Work your way up to the Potent rare node for an imbuement skill boost, and then at the glyph socket, we'll use the Snare glyph to increase our poison and death trap damage. The additional bonus is also going to increase the size of our poison trap. Now heading towards our Legendary node, we'll grab Ready Supply for non-physical damage buff and all the surrounding magic nodes. Then we'll go to the Legendary node, which is going to give us a 3% increased poison resistance and a huge 20% increased poison damage whenever we use an imbued skill. Then we'll head to the bottom of the board, grabbing the Imbuer rare node along the way. This last board is still a work in progress because my rogue is currently only level 80, but I believe I'll be using the exploit weakness board, which is going to give us 1% increased damage to vulnerable enemies for 6 seconds up to 15% with this legendary node. For the glyph, I'm leaning towards using the combat glyph for the increased crit damage and the energy regeneration as well. Moving on to the Vampiric Powers, I have Ravenous to increase attack speed, Prey on the Weak for the increased damage to vulnerable enemies, Accursed Touch, which gives us a 200% increase to our stored souls damage, Moonrise, which gives us increased attack speed, movement speed, and basic skill damage, and lastly, Hemomancy, which damages enemies for 80% of our maximum health every 4 seconds. I wouldn't say my gear is currently ideal, but I'll go over what I'm using and what is necessary for the build. You'll want to focus on getting gear with maximum life, total armor, damage to close enemies, and attack speed for the most part. On your helmet, you'll definitely want to have +4 ranks of poison imbuement, and I'm using the Mangler's aspect for the dazed chance against vulnerable enemies. On your chest, you'll want to have aspect of disobedience to help keep your armor high for survivability. On the gloves, you'll definitely want to have 4 ranks of twisting blades and aspect of bursting venom, which gives us a chance to create a toxic pool that poisons enemies. But also, if we are standing in the pool, our poison imbuement skills no longer have a charge limit or cooldown. On your pants, you'll want +4 ranks of poison trap, which will bring us up to a total of 5 ranks. And for an aspect, I'm using the aspect of might for the damage reduction. On your boots, you'll definitely want movement speed, and I'm using aspect of shared misery for the chance to spread crowd control effects. On the amulet, I have Ravager's aspect, which gives our Shadow Step an additional charge, and if we kill an enemy with Shadow Step, we are now refunded a charge and have increased damage with our next Shadow Step. On the rings, I'm using aspect of corruption for the increased imbuement skill damage against vulnerable enemies and aspect of pestilent points. This is going to give every 3rd puncture strike a poison imbuement and give it up to 150% increased damage. Now for our weapons, I would highly suggest using a crossbow for the increased vulnerability damage, and using the Blade Dancer's aspect, which will cause your twisting blades to orbit you upon return and increase the damage they do upon return based on the distance they travel. For our blades, I would suggest using daggers for the increased damage to close enemies, and using the Edgemaster's aspect, which is going to give us the increased damage based on your available energy, and also aspect of synergy, which will reduce your poison trap cooldown whenever you use Shadow Step and increase the damage of your Shadow Step every time you use poison trap. Hope this video helps you with your roguing. Let me know in the comments if you'll be using this build or if there are any other subjects you'd like to see me cover.